Good evening, everyone. We can probably get started. There are more people expected to join, but we'll get started and they'll join us along the way. So, if you have any doubts or questions throughout this webinar, please put them in the chat. We'll also be taking Q&A section towards the end. But because of the large size of this call, we won't be taking voice questions, but all the questions will be taken through the chat. So welcome to this webinar in which we'll be covering about grad school application process for fall 25 and how to prepare the best version of your application. So we are Team Videsh and our main purpose is to help you land your dream university. Let me introduce you to the founders of Videsh. All of us are very, very active on LinkedIn. So many of you might be knowing about us, and we have conducted more than 15 webinars so far. But in case people in this call are unaware about us, let me quickly give you a brief introduction. My name is Dr. Raj Dandekar. Here is my twin brother, Dr. Rajat Dandekar. And here is our very, very close friend for more than 10 years, Dr. Sridat Panat. We are the three founders of Videsh. And all of us graduated from IIT Madras in 2017 and 2018 as the department toppers. When we graduated, we applied to a huge number of universities and we got admits at MIT, Stanford, UIUC, Michigan, Purdue, CMU, and some of the top universities of the world. Subsequently, we pursued our PhDs. Me and Shridat pursued our PhDs at MIT, and Rajat pursued his PhD at Purdue. While we were doing our PhDs, we really, really appreciated the value of doing research. And this appreciation is seen in all of our webinars and the entire workflow of Team Videsh. We really give a lot of emphasis on research. Here you can see us presenting at various conferences, defending our PhD and master's thesis. And as you associate with Team Videsh, you will also develop the abilities of being a strong scientist and a strong researcher. Last year, we completed our PhDs and we came back to India. We came back with a mission to provide assistance to students such as yourself in the dream of getting into the top universities of the world. And the reason we came back is because when we were applying to universities in 2017, we did not receive streamlined guidance. We really had to figure out everything on our own. We did not have seniors whom we could rely on. And there was so much noise out there on blog posts or different internet channels that we did not know what is true and what is not. So we figured out all of these things on our own. And the reason we started Videsh and the reason we are conducting this webinar in the first place is so that you do not face the similar struggles like we did. So without further ado, let's get started with today's webinar. We'll be covering the following 10 sections, starting with the grad school application process, then going into the details such as university shortlisting, statement of purpose, letter of recommendation, resume, then going a bit into GRE, TOEFL, building your research profile, and finally discussing about our flagship long-term mentorship program, which has benefited more than 120 students so far. As mentioned, we'll be having a dedicated Q&A section towards the end, and all the questions will be taken through the chat. So please try asking questions throughout the webinar. We'll try to answer them concurrently as much as possible, but those questions which get remained will take towards the end. So I'll be covering the first three sections of today's agenda. And let me get started with the first section, which is the basics of the grad school application, which we also call grad school application 101. So before you even think of applying for a grad school, you need to make some decisions very clear and you need to know answers to these questions. The first question which you need to ask yourself is whether you are going to apply for a master's degree or a PhD degree. And this decision will severely affect the next 4 to 5 years of your life. In our experience, we strongly believe that you should choose PhD as an option only if you are committed to doing research or if you want to become a professor in the long run. If you have no research experience in the past, or if you have never done research before, you do not know what the research process is, then doing a PhD is risky, because in the USA typically it's for 4 to 6 years and it's a big commitment. In such a case, it's always better and less riskier to actually go for a master's degree, because the master's degree is for a less duration of time, it's 2 years. And then you can always take the decision of transitioning to a PhD or going for a job thereafter. One more thing to consider is that PhDs are typically 100% funded in all the universities of the world. For example, when I did my PhD at MIT, I did not have to spend a single dollar from my pocket. Whereas for masters, it is quite difficult to get a funding. We can apply for scholarships or fellowships, but the acceptance rate is very, very low. For PhD, we are usually funded through research assistantship or teaching assistantship. This is also a factor which can go in for making the decision. If it's impossible for you to take an educational loan, then try considering a PhD. But again, take into account the risk of spending 5 years on a research topic. After you make the decision of going for a master's or PhD, you will need to have documents in shape. You will need to have a resume, a statement of purpose. You will need to have 3 strong letters of recommendation. It's extremely good if you have a strong research profile, such as if you have publications, and you will need to have competitive GRE scores. GRE has been made optional at many universities, so we will be coming to that part bit later in the webinar. One more decision you'll have to make along with deciding whether you want to go for a master's or PhD is whether you want to apply for the fall cohort or the spring cohort. So if you decide to apply for the fall, the deadline is in December of 2024, and the semester or your college will start in September or August of 2025. That's why these are called fall 25 applications. If you want to apply for spring, the deadlines are earlier. They are in June to October of this year, and then your semester will start in January or February of 2025 next year. Typically, almost everyone applies for a fall cohort because the intake is also much more in number, and it's just more common to apply for the fall cohort. So we also strongly suggest that unless you have some special circumstances, always aim for fall cohort application. So let's say you have decided that you want to apply for fall 2025 and you want to go for a master's degree. After this decision is made, then you will have to go through these documents such as university shortlisting, resume, statement of purpose, LOR, etc. So let me come to the first thing which you will need to do after making the decision of, let's say, going for a master's and going for fall 25. The first decision which you need to take is university shortlisting. And what we mean by university shortlisting is preparing a list of 25 to 35 universities with descriptions of their admission or admit percentage, application deadlines, etc. One thing which is very important is to start making this list as early as possible. We have seen applicants getting stressed towards the end of their deadlines and just quickly making some university list. So, for example, this is the list which we had made for a candidate who had joined our long-term mentorship program. You can see the comprehensiveness of this university list. We have the university name and we have its deadline, the LORs or the letters of recommendation required, whether GRE is optional or not, minimum GPA required, QS rankings, etc. One more thing which is extremely important is not selecting universities just based on your GPA alone. We have seen many candidates who have a GPA of 8 or 8.2 and them getting into Ivy League universities just because they have a very strong research profile. So GPA is not the only thing which matters. If you have a very strong research profile along with it, you can get into top universities. So don't blindly select universities based on the QS university rankings. We have also seen candidates who think that their GPA is less, and so they don't apply to good universities just based on the QS rankings. That's why we recommend the easy, medium, and dream rule when selecting universities. For example, when I selected my top 10 universities, I made sure that I had 3 easy, 3 medium, and 3 dream universities. So here you can see, based on the candidate's profile, we had made a classification as easy, medium, or hard. and your question would be, how do I make this classification in the first place based on my profile? And several different things go into making that classification. Typically, we have a big list of students who have gotten into universities before, and we compare your profile with their profile, and that's how we make this classification. It's important to take several different things into account, like industry experiences, research experiences, the quality of your LORs, and not just your GPA when deciding the universities. So whether you are a applicant for fall 25 or whether you are thinking of applying to universities later on, it's a very good idea to start maintaining this sheet right from now, and start, even though you don't know whether it's in easy, medium, or dream category for you at the moment, it's fine. At least start filling out all these other columns which are fixed, and this information is usually mentioned on the university website also. If you are a PhD applicant, you can go through the research groups mentioned on the university website's name and try to see if their interests are well aligned with yours. So after making a decision of masters or a PhD, and after making a decision of going for fall or spring, the next thing you should start doing is maintaining a university shortlisting Excel sheet like this. Next, we come to one of the most important documents of the application process, and that is the statement of purpose. For students who do not know what a statement of purpose is, a statement of purpose is essentially your pitch to the admissions committee, explaining to them why they should take you compared to all the other candidates who are applying. It's your story which is explained to the admissions committee, as compared to the resume, which is very objective in nature and it's just 2 pages, right? A statement of purpose allows you to be subjective in nature. It allows you to tell your story. So essentially, if your GPA was reduced in one semester, you can use your SOP to explain why it was reduced. You can use your SOP to tell that in this semester I was focusing on industry activities or positions of responsibility, and that's my GPA was less, and I worked a lot on improving it in the subsequent semesters. In an essence, you can use your SOP to convert your weaknesses into strengths, which is not possible in the resume. And that's why the statement of purpose is one of the most important documents in the application process. So let me now come to how to get started with writing the perfect statement of purpose. We have seen so many SOPs in the last 1 year. We have seen more than 500 SOPs, and most of them are really poorly written. People think that it's just a essay, but it's really not. Students who get admits to the top universities have a special and a unique way of writing their SOP, and we have tried to identify common patterns in all of these SOPs. So the best SOPs, from what we have seen, have four things at the heart of them. The first is the thread, the second is the hook, the third is the supporting cast, and fourth is casting the net. You might be wondering what all of these different terminologies mean. So let me come to each of these separately. First, let me come to the thread. Before even starting to write your SOP, you should have a clear understanding of what is that unifying vision which binds your SOP together. So thread is the unifying vision which binds your SOP together. Every single paragraph of your SOP should be ultimately directed towards the thread. Let me explain what this means. So these are the paragraphs which are taken from my SOP, which got me admitted into MIT. So the thread in my SOP was very clear. I wanted to create an impact in the field of fluid mechanics. And you can see that I reiterate this thread at several different paragraphs of my SOP. In the first paragraph itself, I have written, this very pursuit has inspired me to deeply explore the field of fluid mechanics and to create an impact in this field. I am keen to create such an impact by pursuing a master's degree followed by PhD at MIT. Then in another paragraph which comes on a later page in my SOP, I write a master's degree followed by PhD at MIT becomes an ideal choice for me for creating an impact in the field of fluid mechanics. So whoever reads my SOP, they will have a clear understanding that okay, this person is very clear. They have a clear vision, and that vision is creating an impact in fluid mechanics. The problem with many SOPs is that students first write about computational dynamics, then they write about energy, then they write about material sciences. So if you write multiple different things like this, it makes your SOP scattered. It feels that there is no unifying thing which binds your SOP together. You might have done several things in your undergraduate life. The first challenge in your SOP is to find one thread which connects all these things together. So for example, if you have done work in energy systems, manufacturing, as well as let's say material sciences, and you are thinking what can be that thread which binds my SOP together, maybe that thread can be dynamical systems, creating an impact in the field of dynamical systems. And within that, you can add all the things which you did in your undergraduate. So it's very important to find the common thread which links your undergraduate or your work experiences together. So before thinking about writing your SOP, try to think about what is that unifying vision which binds your entire SOP together. The second thing, which is probably the most important thing in your SOP, is the hook. The hook is that aspect of your story which is your biggest strength. Either it can be your GPA, or it can be a conference or a journal publication, or it is being part of a prestigious internship or fellowship. The hook is what distinguishes your SOP from the others who are applying to the same department. For example, these are two paragraphs taken from my SOP, and I believe that these two paragraphs got me admitted into MIT. So the hook in my SOP was pretty clear. I had a journal and a conference publication in the field of fluid mechanics. So you can see in the first paragraph, I write about my work which was presented at the European Fluid Mechanics Conference. And in the second paragraph, I write a lot about a journal paper which was later presented in the Journal of Fluid Mechanics. Everyone in my batch was applying to MIT, but only I got admitted into this department because I had these publications. One good thing about the hook is that even if you don't have the hook right now, you can develop it. You can utilize time to develop your hook, and that's why we recommend starting early so much. Although GPA cannot be changed after a certain point of time, but you can really work to have research publications on your profile. In fact, in our long-term mentorship, we guide students exactly for that. In 4 to 5 months, you can have a very strong publication on your profile, which can be the hook. The mistake many students make is that they start thinking about the application in September or October. And that's very late because you just have 2 months to then submit your application. Typically, the deadlines are in December. So there is not enough time to develop the hook. So it's great that all of you students who are attending this webinar have started in February, because we have a lot of time to develop the hook in case it does not exist. The third part of a successful SOP is the supporting cast. So supporting cast includes tangential yet strong applications of your SOP which are not directly related to your main field. So for example, I was applying to fluid mechanics, but I had done an internship at ITC installing solar panels, but I had still linked it to my thread. So if you have some material which is not directly related to your thread, you can wrap it in the this type of format. You can write the first line which is linked to your thread. You can write the last line which is linked to your thread, and in between you can put this material which is tangentially related or not directly related to your thread. So you can see I wrote about this ITC internship, which was not directly related to fluid mechanics, but towards the end, I brought it back to my thread. I said that a master's degree followed by a PhD becomes an ideal choice for creating an impact by leveraging the knowledge gained in the field of fluid mechanics. So our life does not always follow in a linear manner, right? We don't join the first year of undergraduate thinking that after 4 years I want to apply in this field. So every single thing I do will be directed towards this. Many things change. In fact, our field of application might also change. The thing to keep in mind is that although you have done tangential things, you have to do things like this in the SOP to make it aligned with the main thread. So supporting cast adds depth to your SOP. And the last thing which is very important is casting the net. In the last two paragraphs of your SOP, you have to make your pitch to the university. You have to tell the university why would you be a good fit, and which research groups in the university you are interested to work with. So you can see these are the last two paragraphs of my SOP. In the second last paragraph, I had written about the research groups which I am interested to work with. Here also, I have seen students not doing too much research about the university and randomly writing research groups. That's why we strongly recommend to maintain this Excel sheet here, so that you can also have a column for the research groups which you are interested in. And if you start maintaining that Excel sheet early, right, by the time you come to writing your SOP, you can quickly take references from that Excel sheet and fill this second last paragraph. In the last paragraph, it's important to demonstrate your pitch. So here I have written that I feel that with the experience of doing both experimental and theoretical research and the knowledge gained from doing relevant courses, I would be able to contribute positively to the research output of MIT. I am optimistic that I will meet the aspirations of faculty in this area. Hence, I am eagerly looking forward to pursuing graduate study at MIT. The mistake which many students make in this paragraph is they write about what the university can add to their profile, but they don't write about what they can add to the university. Remember that it's a two-way street. You have to mention that how you will be able to contribute positively to the particular university. So, in summary, the four major things which contribute to an effective SOP are the thread or the vision, which binds your entire SOP together, the hook, which is the strongest point of your SOP. Remember that if hook is not there, you can spend time to cultivate the hook. And that's why it's so important to start early. Third thing is the supporting cast, which are elements not directly related to your thread, but which still add depth to your SOP. The fourth and the final thing is your pitch to the university. Why should the university select you? What do you offer to the university? All of these four elements make for a very strong SOP. Quickly summarizing the do's and don'ts, do not write too many cheesy stuff on the SOP. We have seen so many students writing multiple quotes of your favorite scientist, writing about Elon Musk and how you are inspired by entrepreneurs. It's fine to include one sentence, but don't write too many cheesy stuff like that. It does not work. It's a very serious document, and all the university is looking for is the work you have done. Secondly, it is very important to look at SOPs which have worked before. So if you manage to get hold of SOPs which have got people admitted into MIT and Stanford, please try to take reference of those SOP formats which are successful and try to incorporate learnings in your own SOP. At Videsh, we offer SOP crafting service as well. So if you are interested, please reach out to us. We can even share the entire SOPs which got us into MIT and Stanford. Finally, don't get your SOP reviewed by 15 or 20 people. Find only one or two people who can add quality feedback and quality comments to your SOP. For me, it took about 2 months of edits and revisions to finalize my SOP. So you also need feedback, but get it from people who have experience in this kind of work. Lastly, now let me come to the part two, which will be covered by Dr. Rajat, in which he will be talking about the letters of recommendation, resume, GRE TOEFL, and building a strong research profile.
Okay, so in this section, I'll be covering the remaining three parts of your application process, which include the letters of recommendation, the resume, and the English exams. So let's start with the first document, which is the letters of recommendation. If people in this call have not heard about LORs, these are documents where your professors or your managers at the company endorse you. The endorsement can be for your academic skill set, it can be for your research skill set, or a combination of both. Typically, admissions committee require at least 3 letters of recommendation. What we usually recommend is that when you are writing these letters, it is very important to keep in mind, firstly, the credibility of the people who are giving you these LORs. And by credibility, I mean, let's say, getting an LOR from an HOD, which is the head of a department, or a professor, it counts a lot more when compared to getting an LOR from, let's say, a PhD student or a postdoc student. Then secondly, the second factor apart from credibility is the diversity which is there in your letters. So by diversity, I mean compared to getting all the 3 LORs from, let's say, people in academia, if you do a combination of people in academia as well as people in industry, let's say 2 from academia and 1 from industry, that adds a lot of diversity to your letters. It gives a sense to the admission committee that this particular student is not just well versed in working in an academic setting, but also in an industrial setting, which might help, let's say, if you are applying for a master's or even for PhD, where there are a lot of practical or hands-on applications. And finally, the most important thing is the strength of your letters itself. And I'll come to why the strength of the letter is important. So generally, by strength, I mean there are letters of recommendation who are crafted in a very weak manner, and they sound very generic, as opposed to letters of recommendation which sound exceptional. And exceptional LORs can only come from people with whom you have worked for an extended period of time. So if you want to have at least one LOR which is very, very strong, then we generally recommend students to spend at least 6 months to 1 year with a professor or with the manager of your company so that they can endorse you strongly. So just think about it. If you have just spent 2 months with a person, how glowing can the endorsement be? It can only be glowing up to a certain extent. But let's say if you have spent around a year with a person, then that person is much more likely to endorse you for multiple things. Let's say ability to work in a team, ability to dodge any obstacles, think outside the box, find creative solutions to problems, etc. So the strength of the LOR is something which matters the most, even more than the credibility, I would say. Uh, Now, these days we are seeing that a lot of professors are asking students to write down their own versions of the LOR, which means that you have a lot of control when you're writing these documents. So we have seen that people take a lot of misuse of this control. We have seen people writing so many things in the LOR, saying that in the childhood of this particular person, they were passionate about electronics and they built a lot of radios, etc. So it is very unlikely that a professor would know about your upbringing and what you used to do before you met the professor at the college. So try to keep it very, very professional, but at the same time, don't try to undersell yourself. It is completely okay if you try to oversell yourself a little bit in the letter of recommendation because it should be glowing. Now, most likely the professor is not uh, end up going to read your LOR after you type it and share it with him, and they'll directly send it to the admissions committee. So whatever you're writing in the LOR is going to be the final version, which is read by the applications committee, which is why it is very important to make sure that the LOR is written in a proper way. We have seen a lot of students these days are using Chat GPT to write these letters of recommendation, and frankly, I can easily make out letters which are not genuine. Because if I'm writing a letter for someone, I don't write it in perfect English. I make mistakes at some locations. My grammar and syntax is not the most coherent because that's the way humans typically write. If you use Chat GPT, then in most of the cases, the writing is so flawless that you can make out that it's written by a bot. So try to make sure that you take care of these points which are very critical when writing an LOR. Now let me just take you through one sample letter of recommendation to help you understand what is the meaning of a glowing LOR and why it is important to get it from someone under whom you have worked from for an extended period of time. Okay, so this is an LOR of which is written for Dr. Sridath, who is there in the call with us today. So this is a LOR which I really like because it includes a lot of things. It includes several things, including the research endorsement for academic skill set, endorsement for communication skills. So let's just look at this paragraph. So this is a paragraph where the professor talks in detail about how this student is very much capable of pursuing research uh, with a problem that is really challenging and not very easy to solve. So the professor goes into details about the technicals, which is completely fine. These paragraphs can have some technical details. And then finally, the professor ends up mentioning that the work was published, etc. There is another advantage of pursuing research with a professor and then getting an LOR from them because they can endorse you for your research skill set, which is very rare, especially if you're applying for a master's. Then getting this sort of endorsement is really rare and it can help you stand out from the rest of your peers. Then these paragraphs, the next two paragraphs again talk about research. This paragraph talks about industrial applications apart from research, how this particular student helped in business pitches, in startup pitches, startup competitions. And then this last paragraph is something which really impresses me because it summarizes everything very nicely. So for example, I just focus on this line. So it talks about foundational work, clever inventions, fundamental and rigorous frameworks that can bridge the gap between fields, ability of the student to think from first principles, apply it to any problem, etc. So a strong LOR constitutes endorsement for research skill set, academic skill set, then communication skills, and then finally everything that should come together in the last paragraph. And out of the three LORs, it is completely fine if you don't have all the LORs of this quality, but at least one LOR should be like this. It should go more than one page in the length of the LOR. And if you have 1 year to apply, then start thinking of this LOR from right now itself. So in my third year of my college, I actually approached a professor because I wanted to do a research problem under the supervision of that professor. And I ended up doing research for a span of more than 8 months to 1 year. And there were several advantages of that. Firstly, it became an excellent point in my resume. And I got an LOR from this professor endorsing me very nicely about my research contributions to their lab. So if you want one glowing LOR, then you have to think right now. In 2 months, you cannot get an LOR which is very, very strong. A lot of students take this part of their applications very lightly, but this is in fact one of the most important documents in your application process. So you must start thinking about this in advance. The next document is your resume. A resume is like a 30 to 60-second pitch to the university. And it includes a number of things such as academics, let's say grades, the projects that you have done, etc. So one thing which every students have in their resume is the projects. It is extremely common. It will not distinguish you from your peers. What ends up distinguishing you is whether you have done any research work, whether you have any publications which can either be just submitted or accepted. Either is fine. Whether you have any patents, whether you have any conference presentations, etc. So the first page of the resume actually ends up making the biggest impression, and it stays on the minds of the admission committee the longest. Because if, let's say, I am a member of the admission committee and I'm going through, let's say, 30 resumes in an hour, so I barely have 2 to 3 minutes to go through one resume. And so the first page is the one that is going to make the maximum impact for me. So have a look at this resume again of Dr. Sridhar. You can see that the first page is extremely impressive. It directly starts with the publication section, which itself is very rare. I don't see a lot of resumes which start with that. Secondly, I can see it has more than 4 to 5 entries, which means that this particular student in their college has worked on, let's say, 3 to 4 different research projects, which again is very rare. Now, it is completely fine if you don't have a lot of research projects to write about. What we recommend is that start with just one publication in the publication section and one in the conferences section. And that too, even if it is not published, it is fine. Dr. Raj had a resume where they had no paper which was published in the journal, but it was only submitted. And he got admit from MIT. And the reason that was possible was that even if you have just submitted your paper, you can add a link in the publication section that can direct the admissions committee people to your portfolio website, where they can see a preliminary draft of your paper that has been submitted. So it becomes a proof that, okay, this student has actually worked on this research problem, which is very interesting, very new, and they have submitted it to this particular journal. So the first page of your resume is very important and you should focus a lot on that. Of course, the formatting of the resume is important. There should not be any syntactual errors. The grammar should be fine. That is the first level of the resume crafting that you should take care of. After all that is done, then you should move towards the individual sections. Now, let me go through my resume to help you understand the different sections. So this is my resume. You can see that this resume also starts with the publications and the conference presentation section. Now, even I did not have any paper which was actually published at the time of application. One of the paper, as you can see, was under preparation. One of the paper was simply submitted to a journal. However, I had multiple conference presentations in which either I had presented in the conference or one of my professors had presented in the conference. Either one of the two is okay. And then I had a section on patents and academic honors and achievements. Now, for a PhD, it is fine if your resume goes more than 1 pages long. My resume was up to 3 pages long. You can see here. I have focused a lot on this section, which is the research projects. Now, here I have more than 5 to 6 points. Every single project has been divided into 2 to 3 bullet points, where I write about the main aspects of the project. And then finally, I go into professional experience, relevant coursework, etc. Now, I can understand that every single student has different peaks in their profile. For example, be a student, lot of projects. I have encountered several applications where students don't have any research work to show, but they have a lot of projects. So in such cases, I encourage such candidates to start with the projects because that is the highlight of their resume. But nonetheless, in either cases, you should have a portfolio website that is linked with your resume very closely. For example, here you can see I have added links. And this website is simply made using Google Sites. It doesn't take more than 5 to 6 hours to make this website. So this immediately catches my attention. This resume looks very impressive to me, especially because of these sections uh, which are written, first of all, in a good format. The syntax and the formatting looks proper. And secondly, if you look at it, there are number of points here which are unique as compared to the peers who have also submitted their applications to the same university. And then finally, all of these three documents, your statement of purpose, your resume, and LOR, these are the three documents which are the most important documents in your application process. And all these three documents should be coherent. So by coherency, what do I mean? Let's say in SOP, Dr. Raj talked about the hook of the application. Now, let's say the hook of the application is the particular project you have done. Now, if you get an endorsement for the same project by the same prof in your LOR, then that becomes a coherent story. Because then if I read it in the SOP and the same thing is validated in an LOR by a prof, that is excellent, because it means that the candidate has actually worked on this research project and the professor is praising the candidate for this particular work. And then the resume should also go hand in hand with the SOP, because this hook should be highlighted at the top. So whatever you're writing in your SOP should be reflected in your resume, as well as should be endorsed in your LOR. The LOR adds credibility to your story. The resume is like a pitch to the department, and the SOP is like a foundation to your story. So just remember that these three documents are very important in your application process. And even though writing these documents, maybe they take a couple of months, but the planning starts much more in advance, maybe 8 to 10 months in advance. So right now is actually the best time to plan these documents properly. The next section is about the English exams, which are becoming less important. Nowadays, it's not compulsory to write GRE, which is completely fine. GRE is waived off by a number of universities. Some of the students still opt to prepare for GRE, which takes around 1 to 2 months for preparation. It is completely possible to prepare by yourself. You don't need to join any agency for preparing for GRE. There are a number of resources online which you can use to prepare. The most important examination that I would like to focus on is the TOEFL, because since India is a country where the native language is not English, a lot of the universities require us to give TOEFL or IELTS. So here it's important to prepare for these exams. And typically, if you start the preparation by July, August, September, it is fine. It takes 1.5 to 2 months for preparation. In the TOEFL exam, there is a speaking section where an equal weightage is given. 30 marks are reserved for the speaking section. That is the section where a lot of candidates find it difficult, because in the examination hall, you have to speak for some time and everyone else in the room is also speaking at the same time. So sometimes it becomes difficult to focus on your own speech and you might get distracted. So a practice of 1 to 1.5 months is important to help you overcome that distraction and score well in the exam. Any score above 100 is typically okay. Above 105, 110 is excellent for these TOEFL or English exams. Now, these exams are something which you don't need to think about from right now. Right now, your only focus should be on building your research profile or your application profile in general. July, September is the time where you start thinking about these exams. So if you are planning about applying for fall 25, just have these things in your mind very clear. Don't try to mix up both of the things. Right now, the most important thing for you is building your research profile. So to help you understand the importance of research in grad schools, I would just like to go a little bit into my story. So as I explained to everyone, I started building my research profile in the third year itself. The first instance of it was when I went for an internship in Germany. So this was an internship which lasted for 2 to 3 months. After the internship, I actually wrote a report. This was the report which I wrote with my professor. Now, this is like a technical report which all of us have written as a part of one or the other course. Now, the next step that I did was that I converted this technical report into a research paper, which firstly I published in a conference. This is a conference which happened in India, INACOM. And secondly, I published it in two journal papers. This journal paper is written in German because it was submitted by my professor. You can see that the first author is my advisor in Germany. The second was actually a book chapter where I am the first author. So out of this single work, which is just this simple technical report, I actually converted this into a conference paper and two journal papers with the same work. And you can see this added to my research profile because now in my resume, under the publications and conferences section, I could write 3 points. So this is something very important. A lot of us have done research projects or projects in our undergrad or let's say industry. And a lot of us have a mental barrier that, okay, I have done a project, but it is very difficult to take it into a research stage. No, it is not at all difficult. It is very much possible to at least submit it to a domestic conference where the barrier to entry is very, very low and you can get your work accepted first. That is what I did. We first submitted it to a domestic conference. There it got accepted. So we got the confidence to then submit it to the Springer book chapter. So it is very much possible to start with a simple project which you might have already done and then convert this project into a research publication. So as you can see, I did an international research internship and it got accepted into a conference, plus I had a publication also out of it. The second thing that I did was that, let's say now, okay, so I have done this work. If I approach this prof for an LOR, I would get an LOR, but it would not be very glowing because I worked with them for only 2 months. Parallelly, I started approaching with a professor in my university at the end of my third year, saying that I wanted to do a research project. So this is actually one of the initial conversations with this particular professor. You can see that it starts with me asking one of the PhD students that please send me the papers relevant to the problem. And then I started reading a lot of papers. And this was years after that. So it says that the manuscript has been accepted for publication in a journal called Chemical Engineering Science. So this was actually one of the first journal papers which I submitted in the year of 2018. And here is how the professor congratulated me. It says, congratulations to both of you. I think Rajat has learned a lot on not only how to do research, but also handle reviewers' comments. The reason the professor has typed this is because we had received rejections from two journal papers initially. And because of these rejections, I was really demotivated for some time, but then my professor encouraged me to apply. This is normal in research cycle. And then it eventually got accepted. So this was my journey, and all of this happened in college itself. So it is possible to do this. It is not very difficult. You just have to stay committed and focused in your undergrad life, or even if you're working in a company, it is still possible to do this. Don't get distracted by a lot of things. Let's say many of your peers might be engaged in multiple activities, but if you have decided to build your research profile, keep that as your first priority and then just focus on it 100%. Be laser focused on your journey. So what we essentially want to do is that this is your resume. Let's say the resume on the right, you have a lot of projects listed. Now, through this webinar or even as a part of our long-term mentorship program, we have only one goal: to transform your resume, which is on the right, to something which looks like the resume on the left, where you have some publications and conference presentations, where your research profile is elevated by 5 times, which increases your chances of acceptance in some of the best universities in the world. And this is especially beneficial for students whose GPA is not very high. We have seen that students with low GPAs have gotten into excellent universities just because their research profile was extremely strong. So this is what the resume of Dr. Raj. You can see that in the publication section, they had written that the paper is in preparation. It was not even published, but still he got accepted into MIT. So typically there are 3 ways: journal papers with new results, literature review papers, or preprints. If you are, let's say, someone who don't want to do anything new, let's say you don't want to engage in deriving a new result or deriving a new methodology or doing something novel, literature review papers are the best way to get started. So literature review papers are where you basically read a lot of papers and then make a summary. Why is this useful? Imagine if there is a new researcher who is getting into the field, let's say of artificial intelligence. Instead of going through all the papers which have been written on the topic of generative AI, if I just read one review paper, I am done. I now know exactly what has happened in the field and where the field is heading to. That is why review papers are extremely valuable, extremely important, and very much respected by the research community. Now, the only one skill that is required here, if you see the second step, review the first 25 papers to identify the story. This is the step where you need to focus your maximum attention on. The thing is, you are not doing anything novel here, which is fine. But where your energy and creativity is going is summarizing the works which people have done and making it easier for a broader audience to grasp so that people can follow along very easily. So my advisor always used to say that whenever you're writing any review paper, think that a college student is reading it who has zero knowledge about the field. Your job is to make that student understand what you have written in the paper. So these are the broad steps of writing a literature review paper. And you can also submit your work to platforms like Archive. The advantage of Archive is that it is there is a lot of leniency in the review process. If the formatting is correct and if you have a decent level of novelty in your project, then it will be accepted into Archive. And a lot of our students in the long-term mentorship program, in fact, start by doing this. They submit the paper first to Archive, and then they end up submitting it to any journal. And then finally, you can, of course, convert your course projects into preprints and then submit it to Archive or any other journals. So at the end of this section, I just want you to remember that SOP, resume, LOR, these three are the most important components of your application. All of these are linked together. Even though writing these applications don't take a lot of time, making sure that you have enough points to write in these documents takes a lot of planning. And if you are applying for fall 25, we highly encourage to spend these 3 to 5 months in building your research profile, which is possible either by converting one of your course projects into a publication which can be submitted to a conference first, or a journal publication. If you do not want to work on anything novel, it is completely fine. You can focus on writing literature review papers, where the major part of your work will be reading a lot of papers and then forming a summary about them. So with this, we come to the last part of today's webinar, which is the long-term mentorship, and it will be covered by Dr. Sridath in detail.
Thank you, Rajat. So, long-term mentorship program has now become our signature program in Videsh. We had started this in the beginning of 2023, so that was last year, and we had almost close to 180 or 200 students who went through our long-term mentorship program. who are currently your seniors and who got admitted into so many amazing universities. So admits are still coming through March, month of March, and even sometimes till mid-April. But so far it's been going really well. So we are continuing with it this year. So assuming that all of you are looking forward to applying sometime in 2024 for fall 2025 or spring 2025, this is meant for you. There are several students who also enroll in the long-term mentorship program for applying for research internships abroad. So if you are in college in first year, second year, third year, etc., it's a good idea to do research internships like DAD, MyTax. There are other internships at MIT Media Lab or NTU or NUS Singapore and many other universities. There are internships which are open during the summer. And it's a very good idea for you to do those things because it will help you even during the application. So we'll basically be helping you on two different aspects. One is building your strong research profile by helping you figure out what is the best way to convert either your past projects into publications or some new projects into publications, and then crafting your application, the solid coherent story in the application. So this was an example of one of the papers that we worked on with one of the students. So the original version of the paper which she wrote had so many issues, like writing wise, the way in which the story was being conveyed, the scientific appeal of the entire manuscript, etc. And then the final submitted version was like a totally different thing after she worked with us for like 3 to 4 months. So this is a perfect example of what we can make happen by taking very defined actions in the paper writing process. So we even got some reviewer comments for this paper saying the figures were incredibly well conveying what it was supposed to convey. The language of writing was really, really good. So the impact was very clearly measurable. We also have to build a personal portfolio website, which we will teach you during the long-term mentorship program. And if any of you do not know what's a personal portfolio website, it is that one place where you put everything that you have ever done in a very systematic way. So on your LinkedIn profile or on your GitHub repository or portfolio, you won't put everything, but this is an example of a portfolio website by Raj. You can see that there is a simple homepage talking about what he does, who is he, etc. And here you can see a list of publications. And these publications are listed in such a way that whoever is looking at it can easily access it just by clicking it. And basic details are provided: the author name, the journal in which it is published, etc. And if you have conducted talks or any seminars or even webinars which are in the scientific world, you can add that here. If some of your work was featured in media, either in international or national news or science outlets, you can mention that here. So this website was created using GitHub pages, but you can also use other technologies. So this website, which I created for myself, was using Google Sites. It actually took me only less than a day to create this entire website. So I also listed similar things. There was a home page. Then in the research section, I showcased the projects which I did with a beautiful thumbnail image, a title of the paper, the authors, and the link to the paper, etc. And then some of the items were the work which I did was featured in the media. Then you can also attach the latest version of the resume here, because once you have a resume which you submit to the university during the applications, after submission you cannot change it. But here, if you link it, you can keep changing this. You can keep updating whenever some changes are happening to your profile after you submit the application. And let's say you have projects with some videos or some audio visual material that you want to show to the admissions committee, because you can't show those things in your resume or SOP or LOR, right? In those three documents, it is just text, you are just writing. But here you can create a lot of impact by showing, if you have a good poster which won some award, you can just literally show the poster here. And if you have awards, you can showcase all of that. So this portfolio website is a really, really nice way for all of you to showcase your work, irrespective of how big or how small the work is. And that is one part in which we'll be helping. And then making the story of SOP, resume, and LOR very coherent. What I mean by that is you cannot say one thing in the SOP and the person who is writing the LOR saying something else. Like, you can't say that you are so passionate about robotics in SOP, and the person who is recommending you, the professor or manager from whom you are taking the the LOR, saying that you are interested in, I don't know, computational modeling or something completely different. So there should not be loopholes in the story. Everything has to bind together as one piece. And it usually takes several months of work, and that's what exactly we'll be doing. And several students usually ask us this question of university shortlisting. How does it start? How do we find universities which are not necessarily always in the US? How do I know which are difficult, easy, medium, dream universities? Like in the chat, so many students were asking, is their profile good enough to be qualifying for MIT or other top universities? It's not a one-word answer, right? The life would be so easy if we could predict it with just a little bit of information, and that's exactly why university shortlisting is probably one of the hardest steps in this entire process. It can completely make or break your application. Some students that I know in the past have received all rejects simply because they selected a wrong set of universities which are misfit to their profile. Whereas some students actually, managed to get all admits by nicely selecting a easy, medium, dream set of universities. And it's not just based on the university ranking. It's usually based on three factors. One is university ranking. Second is, of course, the strength of your profile. And third is whether there is a history of this university or this program accepting students of your profile. Like if you are an Indian, for example, whether students like you, whether they get into those universities. So, for example, Duke, Yale, or Johns Hopkins, these are universities which may be in several programs ranking below UIUC or University of Michigan in certain programs. But yet, these three universities are incredibly harder to get, especially for Indians, because it's very rarely you will see Indians going into these universities. So there are so many such factors that come into play. The bottom line that we are trying to tell you is that many students, when they write their story, when they create their resume or SOP, they significantly undersell their profile. Either they are shy to write good things about themselves, or they feel like my project is not good enough, or it is not so great. I have a publication, but it's not in a reputed journal. I have projects that are about to become publication, but I don't know if it will become a publication in the next 2 months. Students always have these doubts, and they focus on these doubts more than they focusing on, okay, how can I sell this point that I have in a stronger or better way? Imagine you are a banana salesman, and this is the actual banana you have, which has spotty points, which are not probably good, but which is also kind of decent, the entire banana. But you are selling with doubt, as if you are telling the customer, hey, I have a banana, it may be good for another 1 or 2 days. You may want to take it. Just hesitatingly, you are trying to talk about your product to the customers. On the other hand, there is another person who is coming and confidently talking about the good things about what they are trying to give the customer. The admissions process is exactly like this. Like, as a student, your job is to convince the admissions committee that you are the best of the best. You may or may not be the best students. And the job of the admissions committee or the university is to convince you that they are a great department and you have to apply there and attract the best talent from all around the world. And in that process, they will not talk about all their shortcomings. They will not focus on any of that. Similarly, you also focus only about your strengths and try to upsell your profile. The long-term mentorship program 2024 cohort has just started last month in January. Students are continuously enrolling it, in which they are aiming to build their research profile and craft their story for the application. And it is divided into 2 phases, phase 1 and phase 2. The duration of phase 1 is approximately 3 months, 3 to 3.5 or even 4 months, depending on the exact timeline that the student is following, but that's the approximate timeline. And this is meant for 2 categories of students: for people who want to apply for research internships in good programs and in good universities, and for masters or PhD or even MBA or any other program applicants. And in this, we'll be focusing on 2 aspects. One is working on a review paper and working on a research article. But if you are a student who has already published 1 or 2 review papers, we will not be working on 1 review paper. Instead, we'll be working on 2 research articles. Otherwise, it's a very good starting point. It's a very good low-hanging fruit that you can consider. And in the phase 2, which is the application part of things, we'll be focusing on university shortlisting, crafting a good SOP, crafting good first drafts of LORs for your recommenders, whether it's your manager or whether it's your professor, working on how to have good scores for in these tests like TOEFL, IELTS, or GRE, resume, portfolio, website, etc. This is also meant for research internship students, except instead of shortlisting universities, we'll be shortlisting different internships programs that you can apply to. You may need a research statement instead of a statement of purpose. Letter of recommendation is needed. These exams are not needed. Resume and portfolio website is always a necessary thing. Even some students asked in the chat, how do you contact professors to get into research internships or any projects with them? For that also you need three things. You need a well-crafted email, you need a very good formatted resume, and you need a portfolio website. So you attach your resume and you link your portfolio website in this well formatted email. With that email, if you try to approach on a personal basis, you try to approach professors, it's likely that they will get back to you, they will respond to you. We also have a very nice profile assessment tool. This is a manual Google form with a very detailed set of questions. It is probably the biggest Google form you will ever see in your life. And students typically take 4 to 5 days to finish this form in detail. This is not an AI form for automatically analyzing your profile and giving you some idea how your profile is. This is a manual form for us to be able to analyze your profile based on your responses. So we will be providing you this as the first thing which we will do in the long-term mentorship program. And last year, the LTM was incredibly successful, which is why we plan to continue it this year also. And we plan to grow it into the biggest mentorship program for grad school applicants worldwide. So last year we managed to work with all these students. We had several dozens of papers which were published, which are still in review, which are still in the making, several conferences in Australia, in Canada, several parts of Europe, etc. And the interesting thing was the research areas. Just have a look at the sample research areas which we have mentioned here. These are the actual research areas in which we work with students, way more than what we actually did during our PhD. So AI, ML, CS was the majority of the students, but there were students in molecular biology, finance, gender studies, even architecture, economics. So many wide different varieties of areas in which we work with students. And it was incredible how, like knowing how to, like when you go through a PhD experience, you read at least 2,000, 3,000 papers from your domain and another 1,000, 2,000 papers from other domains over the course of 5-6 years. And this experience actually makes you really good at, crafting stories, scientific stories for these papers. And that's why we were so successful in working with students in these different research areas. And there were so many other things. We had amazing Discord community, a newsletter which we are launching now. So we strongly recommend you to sign up for that newsletter. It's a free newsletter through which we plan to send you periodic material, like free material, like good. If we come across good resume samples or good SOP samples, we will share them with you. And so many other things. So all of these outcomes were the reason why we decided to continue this year also the LTM. Here I just want to show you some sample papers that we worked with students last year. Sorry, it's loading a bit slow, but I hope you can see these papers. These were really good papers, because you have to also consider the situation of these students. Some of these students had almost zero coding experience, and from that they learned coding logic, and then they figured out how to write papers in ML and various other domains. So these were some very high quality papers that these students wrote. We are so proud of them. We still maintain contact with them. They constantly messages asking doubts and questions about anything technical or non-technical, and we continue to do that, and we plan to do that with students who are joining with us this year also. So this is exactly what we mean by research profile building. You work on projects and ultimately try to publish them. And in terms of admits, we are still getting amazing results. A couple of students got into Johns Hopkins, one student got into Duke, several students got into UIUC, 3 students got into CMU, 2 students got into Cornell. I don't have space to write everything here, but I was more surprised to receive admits from Johns Hopkins, CMU. This was the #1 program. MSAII program is the #1 program in the world, and 2 students got into that, and 1 student got into mechanical engineering. And Johns Hopkins, I personally did not know a single Indian student who went into Johns Hopkins until these students who were our students who got into Johns Hopkins. So now we have our alumni, literally alumni of Videsh, going to do PhD at Johns Hopkins, two of them, and Duke University. I personally did not know. Only one of my lab senior I knew who went into Duke, but now we have this student who's going into Duke this year. So it was an amazing year. If we were to show all of this, it will take us so many pages. But the bottom line is that it was very satisfying for us to see not just papers getting published or all these internships getting successfully applied, everything, but also to ultimately get the final end result, which is getting university admits for all these students. And some students were actually, we were so worried if some students will not get any admit. Like there was one lady, she was like, her age was 53, and we were so worried if she will get into programs, because we don't know how university will perceive a student who is that old, because typically the average age of student is 23. Now imagine a student 30 years elder than the average population who is applying to the university. We had no idea how that will work out, but luckily she now got into UIUC. So we couldn't be more happy for the outcome. This was the outcome from the year before. At that time, we did not have a long-term mentorship program. Still, some of our students went into MIT and Harvard. They still message us in LinkedIn, and we are still personally very well connected. I'll not go through all these testimonials. There are so many amazing comments we received, but I'll save it for another day. But the bottom line is, we want to help you in this way. As far as research is concerned, we'll help you figure out good problem statements, good and easy problem statements. And will these easy problem statements get published in the most reputed journals? Probably not. And it's not needed when you're trying to publish paper for the first time, but it will get published in moderate impact factor journals. We will teach you step by step how to write papers, which some students are currently doing as we speak in our LTM program. We have decomposed the entire paper writing process into 100 to 150 small steps. And these steps we have converted into lessons which you can go through. And we have created specific assignments for students to submit. So one of the first assignments is for the student to submit the top 3 topics in which students are interested to write papers. Then based on that, we will brainstorm to figure out how to select the final topic. Then the next assignment is reading 20 papers from that particular topic from the literature and creating a literature review summary sheet. And based on that sheet, figuring out what might be the story of the paper and write that in the form of an initial 100 to 150 word abstract, like that. So these are all different assignments which we have curated for the students, which they are carrying out, so that by another three months they will all be done with their paper manuscript. And this timeline will be followed even for the application part of things, and ultimately figuring out which journals or which conferences to submit these papers to. So the final outcome that we are imagining, Raj just showed the resume template with bunch of projects. So if you have bunch of projects, that may be your resume right now. And what we plan to make happen is convert some of the projects into papers that are under review or under publication, like already published. Publishing is a long process, of course, we know that, but if it gets published before December, that will be the most amazing outcome. But even papers under review or under preparation, you can mention in the publication section. And those same works, like Rajat showed, you can submit into conferences. It can get accepted very fast. It can even be in the submitted stage. You mentioned them in your resume. And we can move on to the Q&A section where we'll answer your questions. But before that, just one point about the life we had at MIT, Purdue, and USA in general. It was the most transformative experience of our individual lives. We talk about that a lot. We would trade nothing for this experience. It was the most life-changing, the best decision we ever took in our lives. Because the kind of community that you will find in these colleges is, you won't find them elsewhere. These students are coming from different parts of the world, from China, South Korea, Spain, France, India, all over the world. The students are coming from, and they are the most intelligent group of people on planet Earth. And when you spend time with them, automatically your personality will get molded into completely different version of yourself. I personally was a very unidimensional person during my IIT Madras undergraduate days. I was mostly spending time in library, just studying, never participated in any extracurricular activities. And I thought I might become an even more introverted and unidimensional person during PhD, because you are basically working on a problem statement which is difficult and no one else is there to help. So you are all by yourself, etc. Right? But exact opposite is what happened. We had an amazing group of people. Like all of us used to play cricket at MIT very often. We used to go for skiing trips. watching slasher movies, binge watching series, so many different things we were doing, like hiking. Even Raj and I did an improv comedy show at Boston Comedy School where people paid their tickets to come watch us enact that show. So many things which I never imagined I'll ever do in our life. We did that. So the fact that you are all here listening to ideas and serious discussions about grad school application itself is a good thing. If you have already decided that you want to apply this year or whichever year, it's the best thing that can happen in your life. So work hard for it. There will be nothing better than that. With that, we come to the last part of today's talk, which will be the Q&A section. But before that, if any of you are interested to join the long-term mentorship program, we will put the email in the detail, but it is hello@flyvidesh.com. Send an email to this particular email, but don't just send, hi, I'm interested in LTM, a one-liner. Please don't send that, because we get several dozens of such emails on a daily basis, and most likely we will not reply to them. We only want to work with students who are very serious about what they want to do. So please, in these emails, mention in detail who are you, like your name, details of your work or study, when are you planning to apply for grad school or research internship, and what makes you interested in LTM, and please attach the latest version of your resume so that we have some idea, what your profile looks like. So with these, please send us an email, and of course we'll be getting back to you in less than a day. With that, we can move on to the Q&A section. Please feel free to continue asking your questions in the chat.
There are a number of questions I've received personally regarding the LTM and whether it's meant for first year or second year students as well. So the LTM is actually meant for students of all, irrespective of whichever academic stage you are right now. In fact, last year, as Rajat mentioned in the chat also, we had more than 30 to 40% of the students who were in the first year and their second year. It's better if you joined as early as possible, because then you will also have much more time to publish. And if you start liking the research process, then it may develop your, decision of maybe going for a PhD in the long run. So the earlier you start with research, the better. I started doing research with my professor in my second year, and that ultimately led to the paper which got me into MIT. Another question which I have received in the chat is, what is the difference between a paper being accepted and submitted at a conference? If the paper is presented at the conference, can we assume that it has been accepted? Yes. So typically the process is that you generally are required to submit an abstract or a 3 to 4 page document summarizing your work. And then there is the acceptance or the rejection process. So if your paper gets accepted after this stage, only then will you be invited to present at that conference. So if you are being invited to present, it means your paper has been accepted, and then it will be published in the conference proceedings. If you are attending a conference at any stage during this time, please make sure to interact with the professors there, because you can utilize this in the SOP. Remember, as Shridat also mentioned, we are telling a story here. So whenever you think of experiences like these, think of how they can augment your story. In my SOP, I had mentioned that these are the professors I had met at the conferences, and they encouraged me to apply to the university. So think of every experience as a storytelling opportunity.
There were many questions in the chat before when we had started regarding how to build my research profile since I'm just starting out. So I hope this webinar has answered a lot of those questions for you. In general, we just want to again emphasize that it's not very difficult to start building your research profile. You just need to be proactive and have the hunger to write research papers. As long as you have that, then really first year is also like a good time to get started with research. Generally, we have seen people in the second and third years, they get started, but in the last year, we also advised a lot of students directly from the first year itself.
There is a question by Krishanu in the chat regarding they'll be applying in 2025 and what should be the best time to join your program. If you are applying in 2025, right now is the best time actually, because the deadlines will be in December. So if you get started in June to July, it will really be very stressful towards the end. So if you get started right now, the whole process can be completed in 4 months, after which you will submit it to a journal. And then you can start working on the document preparation aspect. So if you are applying, if you're a fall 2025 applicant, then you should not delay it further than February or March to start building the research profile.
There is a question about whether research profile will be helpful for grad school in Germany too. So, yes, so even in Europe as well as USA, in most of the grad schools, we have seen that academics and GPA is something which is very common across candidates. So admissions committee generally like to see some points which make people stand out from the rest, and research profile is something that will help you do that, because academics and GPA are set after college. So what are the things that you can actively work on as a student, and that is your profile building. So it is definitely helpful irrespective of the location of the school in which you are applying to.
Someone has asked in the chat that will an MS degree with two conference papers, but they have a gap of 4 years. So how can that be mentioned in the admissions process? So remember that this is a storytelling process, right? So your statement of purpose is that place where you can explain this gap of 4 years. So of course, having an MS degree with two conference papers is a strong point. But you can use the SOP to actually justify this gap and convert it from a point of weakness to a point of strength. You can mention things like during this gap, you developed the resilience or you developed the qualities to have these skills. Last year, we had students who used the COVID-19 opportunity as the time to portray their resilience, because many students have a gap in their profile during that time because of difficult situations. So instead of treating it as a point of weakness, you should start looking at it like, okay, how can I portray this as a point of strength? That's why the SOP is actually important, because no other place in the application process allows you to do that. The resume is an objective document, it's pretty much fixed. But the SOP is subjective. So you can add these things in the SOP.
I think we have covered most of the questions now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Funding, okay. Fully funded PhD. I think we can briefly talk about funding. So there are three modes of funding. In fact, four modes: fellowship, scholarship, TAship, and RShip. TAship is teaching assistantship, and RShip is research assistantship. Fellowship and scholarship are very difficult to get. They are rare in number, very competitive. Scholarship you get not necessarily for pursuing a particular research. Fellowship is typically for conducting a particular research in a particular topic. Sometimes there are fellowships only meant for energy domains. It's provided sometimes by companies. It is sometimes in the name of very wealthy individuals, etc. But in any case, it's nobody can plan for fellowships or scholarships when they are applying. Teaching assistantship and research assistantship will pay similarly. And it will cover your entire tuition expenses, plus it will give you a stipend depending on the city in which you are living, because the cost of expense is also considered in deciding the stipend. So for example, at MIT in Boston, because Boston is an expensive city, our final year stipend after tax that we were getting in hand was, I think, around $3,300 per month. So it's a good stipend because rent will be maybe $1,100, and so rest of the money is for food and miscellaneous expenses. So you can, if you really cook a lot, and if you are conservative in spending these things, I think you can save up even $1,000 to $1,500 per month in such cases. But in any case, even if your stipend is $2,500, where the rent might be $600, you can anyway save close to $1,000 per month if you are spending money appropriately. So this is how usually funding works out, and it's usually very comfortable. Students who get into PhD programs do not worry about funding. Students who get into master's program manage it either using a combination of TAship plus some partial loan plus personal savings. TAship is sometimes available right from the second semester onwards. In fact, some universities like Duke, I was talking to the student who got into Duke this last week. So she was saying Duke University, her department says 50% of the students graduating from that department go debt free, meaning they have their total expense they take in terms of loan or whatever is zero. So that means department in some form or the other fund the students mostly. And among the remaining 50% of the students, it does not mean that they are entirely in debt. It's just that they are not in 0% debt. Maybe they have some loan, partial loan or something like that. But that's how it is managed.
So I just want to share one thing before we close out. So we have a newsletter, which is a free newsletter, and just if you found the tips given during this webinar helpful to you, then we actually share weekly updates and weekly small nuggets about different things like LOR, portfolio website, SOPs. We even share sample resumes and SOPs. So if you want information regarding that, please subscribe to our newsletter here, as I mentioned over here, again in the link. It's absolutely free, and we will not spam your inbox, and we don't sell your data or do anything like that. We just purely informative, and just to keep you informed of different aspects of the grad school application process.
Yeah. I think we can call it almost a day. If there are more questions, probably you guys can continue to email in this email hello@flyvidesh.com. Just send an email describing your question, and then tomorrow or whenever we get a chance, we will get back to you. And also regarding the long-term mentorship process, if you want to apply, please get to our email, and we'll be getting back to you most likely tomorrow. So thank you so much for attending this webinar. We will definitely be conducting webinars on different topics. That is our plan for this year. We want to make sure that so it will be appropriate to that particular month. So in September, we will be most likely talking about the need of the hour, like SOP, resume, in much more detail. Right now, in this webinar, we wanted to give you a broader overview because you have around 8-9 months in front of you, right? So thank you so much, everyone. We'll see you in the next webinar, and just reach out to us in email if you have any questions.
Thank you, everyone. See you in the next webinar.
Bye bye.
Thank you all. Bye bye. Have a good night.